I'm an artist. You give me a f***ing tuber, I'll get you something out of it.
I don't know if that was an actual direct quote from John Lennon, but if it was, mwah. Folks, welcome back to JoBlo Originals, and happy St. Patrick's Day. You'll notice I'm not wearing green, so feel free to leave a pinch on this video, and by pinch, of course, I mean like the video. I thought with today being such a fun holiday, it might be cool to cover a fun movie that sort of, in some ways, directly pertains to the holiday itself. When I think St. Patrick's Day, I think leprechauns, and when I think leprechauns, I think Irish, and when I think Irish, I think of The Departed. It's weird to me that this is the movie that finally got Marty the Oscar, but if you ask me, it deserves it just as much as any of them. So today, we are gonna take a look at this iconic mafia movie and figure out what the f happened to The Departed.
This is not the regular police. This is the state police.
We are an elite unit.
This is who we're after.
Frank Costello.
Martin Scorsese is the undisputed king of New York filmmakers. No one captures the vivid, frequently harsh reality of the city that never sleeps quite like Marty does. So when news came down that Scorsese would be taking his talents to Boston, home of New England clam chowder and the dreaded Boston Red Sox, some of us were a little taken aback. But in quintessential Scorsese fashion, he would be giving us a true warts and all look at the meaner streets of Beantown, specifically the area known as Southie, known for its working class Irish American heritage and take no bullshit attitude. The very reason that Marty was there to make The Departed, and unbeknownst to him, ultimately achieve a milestone that had avoided him for decades. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take it back. So, we actually have Brad Pitt to thank for the version of The Departed that we all know today. In 2002, a fierce bidding war was underway for the remake rights to Infernal Affairs, a gritty cop drama from Hong Kong made by Andrew Lau. Pitt's production company, Plan B, used almost all of its funds to outbid the likes of Harvey Weinstein for the rights of the remake, which Pitt planned to star in as well as produce. To pen the remake, Pitt hired up-and-coming screenwriter William Monahan, who'd successfully written such movies as Kingdom of Heaven for Ridley Scott and Jurassic Park 4 for Steven Spielberg, though the latter obviously never made it into production. Monahan took the structure of Infernal Affairs' plot and brought the story to Boston, his hometown. In addition to his familiarity with the city's notorious South Side, Monahan felt the need to depict Bostonians truthfully, because as he put, most of the time, they're not very well represented. Now, we're not sure if The Departed is exactly a Valentine to Beantown, but there's no denying its authenticity is part of its crazy charm. In terms of who would direct the film, it would seem as though there was only one choice: Martin Scorsese. The beloved director was coming off of two very difficult big-budget movies, Gangs of New York and The Aviator, and had particularly bad luck on both during post-production thanks to the ever-meddling Harvey Weinstein. As he vowed before, Scorsese was convinced he was done making Hollywood pictures and would focus on smaller independent movies that were closer to his heart. And while there were times it looked like the legendary director wouldn't fully commit to it, in March of 2004, it was announced that Scorsese was climbing aboard the film. Marty later admitted that he saw The Departed as a sign-off, his final Hollywood movie. Around that same time, the script had gotten into Leonardo DiCaprio's hands. Leo had of course just been in Marty's last two pictures, and the opportunity to work with him again on a much different kind of movie was too good for him to resist. The idea was that Leo would play a paranoid undercover cop called Billy Costigan, and Brad Pitt would play duplicitous undercover criminal Colin Sullivan. A problem, at least in Pitt's eyes, emerged when he realized he might be too old for the Sullivan role, because we see the characters as they rise through the ranks of their respective organizations, and they have to be in the same age range. In 2004, Pitt was 40, which is 11 years older than Leo, so the actor decided that it would make more sense to hire someone Leo's age to play his adversary. Pitt would still remain on as a producer, but the search for a new Colin Sullivan had begun. It's rumored that at some point, Mark Wahlberg was going to play the character, being a Bostonian himself, and Wahlberg would seem to be the ideal fit for the role. But somewhere along the line, it was agreed that Wahlberg was a better fit to play the smaller role of the volatile detective Dignam. While not a headlining part, it would eventually nab the actor his first Oscar nomination, so I'd say it worked out. Writer-director Kenneth Lonergan, who co-wrote Gangs of New York for Scorsese, was the one who recommended Matt Damon for the Sullivan part. The fact that Damon was also from Boston could not have hurt, and the studio agreed immediately to the casting. To play the rather grandiose role of Frank Costello, the brutal mobster who controls the criminal underground of Southie, Scorsese went to Jack Nicholson, an actor he'd known for many years but never collaborated with. Nicholson read the script, and while some of it appealed to him, he did not warm to the Costello character, thinking it didn't really give him enough to do. He didn't want to play, as he put it, a quote, black-suited gangster whose power is silent. Scorsese agreed with this assessment, and the two of them transformed a traditional mob boss character into the heathen you see in the film, a maniacal live wire without a morsel of decency. It was indeed Nicholson who brought Costello's perversions right out into the open, coming up with the idea that the character should be as debased as humanly possible, at the same time making him so amusing that the audience could not resist him.
Don't laugh!
Some of his castmates would later admit that they never really knew what Jack was gonna say on a given day, like say pull a giant dildo out of his pants unexpectedly. Nicholson evidently kept everybody on their toes. During a crucial scene where Costello is interrogating Billy Costigan, Nicholson apparently took it upon himself to improvise many lines and beats in order to keep DiCaprio's character, and the actor himself, very uncomfortable. When he pulled out a gun, neither DiCaprio nor Scorsese knew what Nicholson was going to do in that moment, so the trepidation you see in the younger actor's face is in fact real. Scorsese's old pal and frequent collaborator Robert De Niro was asked to be a part of the production, supposedly for the role of Captain Queenan, but De Niro turned it down to focus on directing The Good Shepherd, which ironically was supposed to star DiCaprio, who had to turn it down to make The Departed. Even more ironic still, the role eventually went to Matt Damon, but De Niro had to wait until he finished The Departed before production could begin on The Good Shepherd. Whew! Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some. The last remaining pivotal role to cast was that of police psychologist Madeline Madden, who becomes involved with both Costigan and Sullivan. It apparently took a very long time to fill the difficult role of the only true female protagonist in the movie, but eventually casting director Ellen Lewis showed Marty an indie film called Down to the Bone starring Vera Farmiga, who so impressed the director that he had her come in to audition for him, which of course turned out successfully for her. Though of course this is a very Boston tale, much of the shooting would take place in Marty's familiar New York City. The main reason being that the city offered greater tax incentives than Beantown did. The budget ended up climbing up to about $90 million anyway, making it a risky bet for Warner Bros., the distributor, considering the lewd material, nasty violence, and chaotic third act that eliminates half of the main cast. Honestly, maybe even more. DiCaprio, Damon, and Wahlberg all worked closely with advisors from Boston PD. Damon even participated in a raid on a crack house, though he didn't get too up close and personal and watched from afar as the cops busted down doors and confiscated drugs. Later in the actual film, there's a scene where Damon's character does participate in a similar raid, and the cops that are front and center in that sequence are the same guys Damon saw do it for real. For Marty, authenticity was everything for this movie. Shooting took place in both New York and Boston for about 5 weeks. After it had concluded, post-production commenced and it would soon become clear that reshoots were in order. Wahlberg had gone off to shoot the inspirational football drama Invincible, which required him to wear hair extensions to better resemble the real-life wide receiver that he was portraying. When he had come back to do additional shooting for The Departed, the production wanted him to lose his hair extensions, but Wahlberg couldn't or wouldn't agree since he was still working on Invincible. This apparently led to some tension between him and Scorsese, but they got through it all. And with all that considered, if you ever wondered why Wahlberg is rocking that strange do in this movie, now you know. Post-production never seems an easy time for Marty, and once again he was in constant battle with executives who were meddling in the editing room constantly. Scorsese would eventually get his way, but it never came easy, and working on The Departed once again seemed to affirm that he'd have to leave the studio system behind if he ever wanted to make movies his way. In a later interview, Scorsese called the making of the film, quote, highly unpleasant, and even seemed to worry it would kill him at one point. Thankfully, Marty survived, while plenty of his characters did not. The famous finale, which sees both lead characters gunned down, was apparently a sticking point for Warner Bros. At one point, Scorsese was asked if either Costigan or Sullivan could survive the mayhem. Their thinking was that they had a potential franchise on their hands, and after all, there are 3 Infernal Affair movies in total. Scorsese recalled a test screening that was through the roof with everyone, except for the studio execs, who were dismayed that their own dream of having the series of Departed movies looked to be about as dead as the main characters. That's not to say that there weren't still ideas floating around for a sequel. Some years later, Mark Wahlberg and William Monahan, while working on The Gambler together, went into Warner Bros. With a pitch for a new Departed movie that would take place before, during, and after the events of the original. Obviously, that would enable them to bring back some deceased characters, but the pitch really didn't go well, according to Wahlberg, who envisioned finally bringing Brad Pitt and Robert De Niro into the fold. And as of right now, it looks like we'll only ever get the one Departed movie. But Scorsese's movie legacy is secure enough. The film went on to win 4 Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay, Editing, Picture, and of course, Director. Scorsese's first win. The filmmaker would later muse that he never even considered the idea that The Departed would be an awards contender. He thought he was just making an old-fashioned B-movie, but alas, it was one that connected with audiences. It was also his biggest box office success at the time, grossing almost $300 million worldwide. It may have almost killed him, but at the end of the day, making The Departed turned out to be one of Scorsese's best decisions. If there had ever been any doubt as to his legacy as one of the greats, this film sniffed it out and killed it. Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.